And we're on. I got a bit of a spiel, so bear with me, Connor.
Very good. That's the bit that went out live. Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Ruby from Real Dog. I'm with Kay from the Feed Real Institute. Hey. Many of you know her as our lead instructor of the DIY workshop and our nutrition courses. And we're here with the lovely Dr. Conor Brady. Welcome, Connor.
How you doing? Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
You probably know him from his very famous book, Feeding Dogs, Dry or Raw, The Science Behind the Debate. I have to tell you, this is a wonderful resource for everyone that I know in the industry, but so many dog owners are just trying to figure it out. Bravo, Connor. This is really one of the most fabulous books on the market.
Nice one. I appreciate that. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about meeting feeding standards with whole foods, specifically AAFCO in the wild. This is a big topic, and we're going to tackle it for the next hour. So curious for everyone that's joining in. Oh, I see Fiona. Where is everyone joining in from? Please, you say we have a couple Fionas in here. Before we get started, just so you guys know, as we always do, we're going to go for about 30 minutes, just chatting all the topics that come up in conversation, and we will open the floor to questions from all of you guys. If you have a burning question that you cannot wait for the last 30 minutes, go ahead and drop it in the comments. We are going to repost this live to Facebook and to our YouTube channel at Real Dog Box. And for all of you that haven't heard yet, just a reminder, we are hosting the Feed Real Summit this October 14th here in San Diego. We're going to be talking about practical paths to dog longevity. Tickets are available. If you haven't purchased them yet, they are going very, very fast. We've got wonderful speakers like Dr. Ruth Roberts, Angela Ardolino, Amy Renz, and Rodney Habib, the author of The Forever Dog Book.
Oh,
Lucy.
You don't know Rodney?
I've heard of him.
You've heard of him.
Yeah. So make sure you grab your tickets at feedreal.com/summit. So let's dive in. AAFCO. Those are the guidelines that we rely here primarily on the states for food formulation, and guidelines that are outside of the U.S. are also based on. And we know that AAFCO was created at some point after the invention of kibble, kind of the gold standard for putting the complete and balanced on our food labels across the board, whether it's kibble, cooked food, or raw food. And I think really the question boils down to, can or should we be trying to meet those standards using whole foods when they're clearly based on processed and kibble foods? So, Connor, you've done a lot of research in this. How do dogs meet their nutritional requirements in the wild?
That's a great start. That's my favorite start. Before we even talk about AAFCO, like, how do they do this in the wild? How do animals meet their nutrient requirements? You know, we all get so animated about the calcium phosphorus ratio. People have heard about that and how much calcium's going into your raw dog food, and 10% bone is most important. But which animal are we talking about? A chicken's dead at 10 weeks. Their bones are full of water. They're soft. A beef bone is a year, and it's solid, and it's a lot of calcium. It's very different. 10% beef bone might constipate your dog. Your dog can eat 20% chicken bone, no problem. So this 10% figure, these figures are very wavy and kind of, you know, not very exact because the whole science of it is not very exact. But in the wild, there's a process that animals eat good food. They know what they're eating. They're eating wild food, first of all, which is full of nutrients. They eat as much as they can when they can. And for, 8-10 months of the year, that's easy enough. And there's always a few lean months in the middle. But your body stores those things that you really need. So the bits and pieces that you absolutely need is actually learn to make it themselves. So you can make a lot of your own amino acids, some of your vitamins, a lot of your food can come from your gut. You can harvest nutrients. Your bones are a nutrient sink, your muscles if you need protein. So your body's this enormous machine that can keep going. A pregnant bitch on terrible food can still put out 8-9 healthy pups, and even feed those pups on, let's face it, some pretty dire complete kibbles. And so it's spectacularly effective at keeping everybody safe. But in the wild, Mother Nature has designed all animals to be highly operating. They're not walking around with pancreatitis by mid-age like there's so many Western dogs. They're not walking around obese. They just be cheeseburger for the next predator. They're not walking around with, orthopedic issues because they wouldn't be able to catch their dinner. These things don't exist in nature. These are issues that we have in Western pets, and they're exploding, rising all the time. So Mother Nature doesn't allow for any of that. The weak are picked off or starved, and the strong survive. So nutrients, for an animal like a dog, he's eating prey, and he will get a lot of his nutrients from that. All his protein, all his fat. We don't even need to talk about those. People want to know about the vitamins and minerals. And there's a process where if you get very low in the nutrients, your body will crave food, okay? And it'll crave a certain type of food. In pregnancy in women, you'll see this, but particularly you'll see where, my wife's second baby there, she was screaming for apples, and if there was no apples in the fridge, God help me, never ate an apple before or after, but apples were very important. So there was something in there that she needed. And then you hear stories of people chewing charcoal and all sorts of weird stuff, and that's something that you can see in humans, but animals do it too. It's a process called zoopharmacology. So zoopharmacology is where zoopharma, P-H-A-R-M-A, cognosy, so the animal knows how to treat itself. And there's a process there. When you're low on a nutrient, that animal will go out and seek it. It doesn't even know it's doing it. It's just a wonderful process in the body that when it's low, the body starts to ring the fire alarms go off, and the animal's motivated. Elephants walking hundreds of miles to a salt lick, for example. They're not saying, I need some sodium. They're just like craving salt, and they're saying, right, guys, and the matriarch heads off and she leads everyone to the salt lick. And predators hang around those salt licks because they know prey need them, particularly ruminants eating really poor forage like zebras, wildebeest. They eat the worst of twiggy stuff. They really need their salt. And if you're living in a hot country, you're perspiring a lot, and that's all your electrolytes gone. So you need salt. So salty areas are we know predators hang around there. But the fact that animals do that, there's a great video on YouTube of these goats walking along a dam wall in Italy. I have to send you the link, guys, so you can put it up on the Facebook page. It's a sheer wall, like it's almost 90 degrees, and there's goats just walking along it as if it was flat to try get the salty water that's coming out one bit of it. And they bring their kids up and everything. And it's like, don't bring your kids. It's mad, but they need the salt. So so this salt thing is a kind of, it's called zoopharmacology, and humans do it too. I'm sorry I'm talking a lot here, but I was thinking about this bit AAFCO in the wild, and so all day, and I was skeptical about zoopharmacology. I didn't know much about it. Caroline Ingraham is the boss in this, and she coined the phrase in the 70s. And there's a lot of practitioners out there, a lot of stuff on YouTube. You can see animals self-selecting certain medicines. Oh, you have no problem, doggy. Here's 4 or 5 herbs I think might help. And they'll choose the one they want, as opposed to you ramming it into their food, but that wasn't quite what they needed. So offering them or planting them out the back, some chamomile and some different types of grasses, and so fresh in a pot. So, your dog has a little pharmacy as she goes out the back door. So it's wonderful. So Caroline Ingraham pulled me out of a class one day, and we're sitting there listening. She says, hands up who's stressed, and in a good way or a bad way. So I said, I'm working hard, I'm stressed. And so there was 6 of us on the stage, and she takes out a tub of licorice root powder. And she goes, this is really important in traditional Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, really important for every animal. You need licorice root powder in your life. I didn't know that. I eat licorice also. Very tasty. Licorice root powder, not so much. So she said, everybody wet your finger and dip it in, pre-COVID times, and see what it tastes like. So the lady beside me does it, and she goes, it tastes like, licorice. Comes to me and said, yeah, it tastes like licorice. And they go through the 6 of us, and then comes back to the start, the first aid. And as soon as she tastes it, she goes, oh no, I don't like that. And she said, you can sit down. Came to me and said, I don't taste like licorice again. And somebody else said, no, I don't like that. On the 3rd dip, I said, I could feel it. It was like almost sour in my salivary glands, almost like those kids' sour sweet. And I went, no, that's not nice. And so I sat down, and eventually some guy took like 5 or 6 dabs, and she was saying, you're heavily stressed. You need to go sort yourself out. And he did have to do that. That was a longer bit of the story. But the point was, that's pharmacology in action. You want it, you don't want it. And you wish that would happen with most foods, but foods today are covered with sugar and salt and fat, very cleverly designed that you can just blast right past any and get through a liter of ice cream. But most foods you stop with. If you're eating whole foods, healthy foods, salads, meats, dairy, all that kind of, you eat as much as you need, and generally you will stop if it's whole foods and not adulterated and processed. So I love that example, and that's how these animals are getting their nutrients in the wild. It's not exact. It's not like the elephant gets there and it knows exactly how much salt to eat. And they don't overdo it. Like, cattle will eat the legs of baby birds. Dairy cattle will, because they need so much calcium. They're producing so much milk. Cervids, like deer, who grow their horns every year, antlers every year, and drop them every year and grow new ones the next year. I mean, that's incredible. So that's a massive draw on calcium. They'll hunt out bones and chew them to get the calcium out of baby birds and all that kind of stuff. Caterpillars do it, bees do it, chimpanzees do it. They all pick certain things at certain times to have a certain effect. So we know they do it. And my final point on this very long introduction, I'm sorry, I'm taking up all the time. I posted a video yesterday of wolves in Yellowstone, and the wolves were heading off and coming back with clearly bone items. They weren't meat. They weren't like lovely sides of an elk. It was a clear bone, a little antler, and just a clear bottom part of a foot, and those bits and pieces. And the video caption was saying, these are parts of the pack heading off to bring back toys for the pups, bones to chew on. And I thought that's wonderful. But those wolves aren't worrying about the calcium intake of their dogs. They're not sitting around going, she has to have 1% calcium. Every human knows how much calcium their kids take in. What's your RDA of zinc? Haven't a clue. So the point is that those wolves will eat those bones and chew them and play with them, teething all these teeth. The young pups need these bones, but they're not going to turn into a statue because they've eaten too much calcium, because nutrients come in waves in nature, okay? And your body has learned to adapt to it. That's why those wolf pups can eat bones. It's why our dogs eat raw fed bones. It's why you can leave meaty bones out for a bitch that's lactating. If you need calcium, hon, they're there, and you can, and they do. Or sometimes she doesn't, but it's good to have your calcium supplement sitting there in a raw bone type shape, as opposed to a dog that gets at the calcium supplements. That's a different affair, because the body has that stuff differently. So that's the wild stuff in a very long, very encapsulated kind of intro. We learn to store the things we need, and we put that calcium and the sodium into our bones and stuff, because electrolytes are so important. And you draw that stuff from your bones. It will come to a point when your bones are low in that nutrient, and now you're in trouble. So sampling the bloods for your vitamin and mineral levels isn't the most ideal way to check your body's vitamin and min levels at all, because your body will draw from all the different parts of your body to keep that blood within kind of highs and lows. So when you're low in your blood, you are desperately low. Nerves have been completely leached. You have all the copper and selenium has been leached out of your bones. That's a bad place to be. So just doing a vitamin and mineral check in your bloods isn't ideal, but it works for some diseases. But anyway, I've said enough.
Well, on the other side of that, if we're taking or giving our dogs a vitamin and mineral supplement, a lot of times you see it go right through them, right? See it in the urine. My pee turns like this neon green color. I take vitamins, and I'm like, that's not normal.
Obviously, it's not doing anything.
What is that?
Well, then the dogs can't refuse something that they want too, if you're doing it all in one supplement. Whereas, like, if you're giving whole foods, like our little dog, sometimes she doesn't want fur. And so I'll give her a furred item and she leaves it. And then 2 days later, she picks it up and eats it.
Yeah, that's nice.
So,
yeah, people are doing that. People are taking the zoo pharmacology idea and looking at a complete raw that has a mishmash of all sorts of stuff. And then they say, does my dog actually like spinach? Does she need chicken? Does she like the chicken? And so if you actually put out the food just for fun in a platter kind of shape, and you have different bits and pieces, sometimes the dog just never touches that bit of sweet potato, and it's like, that dog does not want sweet potato. They aren't dummies, and they are pigs. They'll eat pretty much anything. So not to eat something, it's a statement that just doesn't flip my switches. And so it might be something you exclude from the diet, and they might avoid certain meats as well. You might find they love a bit of cooked pork but don't like raw pork, and or an organ meat that they don't like, perhaps. So that can happen. Certainly with dry fed dogs, they've been fed dry for 5, 6, 8 years. They can be particularly picky about the foods they put in themselves.
Absolutely.
And so if you keep feeding them the wrong stuff, you might say, my dog doesn't like raw. And it's like, well, she doesn't like ground up chicken with beef organs in it, but maybe she likes insert other ideas, So yeah, I like that, Kay. That's spreading the food out just to see what she needs is a great idea. Zoo pharmacology, look into it on YouTube. It's free info.
Yeah, I love that.
So interesting. Yeah, I love it.
So do you think that, wolves or wild dogs and the wild dogs have deficiencies generally because of, soil depletion and things that have happened agriculturally over the last century?
I would say if you looked at a wild wolf and had some norms, the problem is, what are you comparing it to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have these, no offense to the probiotic companies, but we have probiotic companies that have a normal gut flora for dogs. And the question is what was that those dogs fed? Are they
Sure.
cereal fed? So AAFCO's norms are for dry fed dogs, which is one of the problems we have with them. So this is how much zinc your dog should have. And it's like, well, your zinc oxide is nothing like my fresh zinc. It's completely different. You get way less fresh zinc in food, but you absorb way more of it. So it's a double whammy. So what they say is normal is perhaps not normal for a raw-fed dog. We know, thanks to work by Gene Dodds, that raw-fed dogs are 30% higher in blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine. So little warning signs for kidney disease for conventional vets.
Right.
But you will say, no, sorry, my dog's eating lots of protein, so she wheezes out protein. So they've got slightly more protein in their wee. What you're comparing it to is wrong. So first of all, if you're saying wolves have a nutritional deficiency, I wouldn't be surprised, because you can't hit perfect prey all the time. They go hungry, bloody hell. Dogs can pups starve to death in the winter. Wolf pups, notoriously, they don't all make it. Polar bears, they don't all make it. So yeah, definitely they'll have nutritional deficiencies. I think they would like to be
part of nature.
Yeah, part of nature. But that is a thing that might go on. I think that where those animals live probably don't have soil depletion, because they are living out in the wilds where we don't farm. It's the farmed stuff, which is a very relevant point, because if you're feeding intensively reared, CAFO reared chicken fed corn, that could be seen as a very poor substitute to a wild turkey, for example. He'd be a nutrient dense fella. Whereas something coming out of intensively reared kind of cattle, is that the same as a pasture reared cattle? Not at all. We know many differences, but fats and omega-3 and all sorts of stuff completely different in those animals. But yeah, so I bet they do, wolves, but who knows? I don't know. But I think people are more worried about their pets and our AAFCO actually giving us the answer to this nutritional deficiency conundrum. That's the what they're selling us. They're selling us that AAFCO have figured that out for us, and I'm telling you, it is very, 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 very far from the truth. It's just
So what do you think about companies that are making fresh food, whether it's cooked or raw, that are trying to meet AAFCO requirements? Is that an appropriate standard?
Oh, Ruby. So yeah, like your raw dog food companies in the US are, governed by your US Department of Agriculture and the FDA if you do something naughty. Well, for the little guys. But and over here we've got the Department of Agriculture as well, who make sure that all is done appropriately. And one of the things that they say is you must adhere to AAFCO standards, because they believe the AAFCO nutritional standards are the optimum standards for a pet, but they're called the AAFCO minimal nutritional standards. They always forget to mention that word to you.
Right.
We don't know what the optimal level of anything is in a dog. Not a single study has ever shown the optimal level of anything. Just the minimum, so they don't die.
Well, and that's actually not entirely true. They're not obligated to adhere to those standards only if they want it right, complete, and balanced on their label.
True, right.
Otherwise, it's required to say for supplemental feeding only. And I know a few raw companies that are like, I'm not going to meet those standards.
Yeah, and that's the problem they have. So the raw dog food companies they say, right, if I write supplementary complementary feeding over here, if we write complementary feeding, people won't know that this is a pretty well-rounded diet, and they'll worry, and they'll go to their conventional vet for nutritional advice, and plenty of vets give great advice, but if they're not selling raw or promoting raw, you're pretty sure they don't have the advice you're looking for if you're feeding raw. So it's I think if I was a raw dog food company, I would still go for that complete badge, because it's so simple to adhere to these minimum standards. I mean, you don't have to you look at some of these complete raws that some of the top nutritionists are putting out, there's only 6 or 7 or 8 ingredients, and you can get past the AAFCO over here FEDIAF standards, easy peasy, no problem. I feel that the raw dog food companies hate doing it though, because they know they're being disingenuous. They're saying, we know these standards are nonsense, and yet we're sticking the badge on our label, but they're doing that to keep the vets off their back, and so their firm doesn't get closed down. So but some of them are still using synthetic vitamins and minerals to get to that point. That's what's really frustrating. And when people ask me what one to use, I'm like, we need to look at the whole ingredient list, because you don't want the same synthetics that you have in your dry food. Yeah, Totally.
That's the whole
I think,
point.
I think definitely the raw dog food market, the ones in the know, the longer you're in the kind of the dark world, the dark side, you kind of say, I don't really want that stuff. I don't want the George Jetson nutritional pill. How did you not do it with the nutrients? I think the two nutrients that really catch unprepared raw dog food companies, no offense, out are zinc and vitamin E. And those two, AAFCO want, for some reason, loads of that in your food.
I know.
And when you go look at the studies that support AAFCO, I mean, we could look at the studies that support the very low protein readings that they say you should feed, or high carbohydrates that are unlimited amounts of sugar. You could look at the studies supporting that. There are virtually zero, nothing that would. So when you get down to the nitty gritties like zinc, there's not a lot to support us. I mean, the copper readings are based on pigs, honest to God. So when you go looking for the data, so zinc is an interesting one. And the problem with it is they need, I can't remember, I think it's 120 milligrams per kilo of dry food, something like that. Don't be quoted on that. But it's something like that. But when you look at prey animals from anywhere, starting at frogs and lizards and birds and mice and rats and rabbits and whatever, when you get them all together, maybe 60, 70, 80 milligrams of zinc per kilo of dry matter. So they aren't anywhere close to the minimum standards by zinc. Why is that? Because AAFCO deal in zinc oxide, which is the worst quality zinc supplement you can feed an animal. Everybody knows it's the lowest of the low. On the 10 steps to good zinc supplements, it's the lowest. It's zinc oxide. Iron oxide is rust. So you're getting an idea of where zinc oxide is. They use that because it's the cheapest. The best zinc supplements are chelated. So that means they're bonded to a carbon molecule. They're holding the hand of a carbon molecule. And the gut membrane loves carbon because it's normal stuff that it knows. It doesn't like all the inorganic minerals. It doesn't like anything not from the land of the living, inorganic. So zinc and iron, and as much as this body needs it, the gut membrane is like, no, you can't come in. So the minerals have to be holding the hand of a carbon molecule, and the carbon is invited to the party. And even though the other guy has the music, he has to be holding this carbon's hand, and in he goes. And that's the way that those chelated supplements are pricey. And so when a raw dog food company is trying to put in enough zinc, it'd be great if they're using good quality supplements, first of all. If they don't, that's a big red mark. If you're using crappy vitamin and mineral mix, there's no excuse for that. I mean, you're in the wrong market using bad quality vitamins and minerals, because we are cottoning onto that. But what we're trying to do is, what those companies are trying to do is they're trying to get enough zinc in there, because zinc oxide is so poorly absorbed. Natural zinc is absorbed 4 times better. So it's not that prey animals are deficient in zinc. It's like that's what the real amount of zinc is in prey animals. And there's more than enough for the dog in natural zinc, because you absorb it 4 times better. But they want loads more zinc. And we're saying, so we run around people that help these companies set up these formulated mixes. And we say, look, put in some ground up pumpkin seeds. And we can tell people that it works to keep the worms away, and it might. But what we're really doing is we're getting lots of zinc in there, and we're getting vitamin E in there. Vitamin E is you've got to have lots of vitamin E, but natural vitamin E, which is way more complex than the stuff they can design in the lab. They can't even, the vitamin E molecule they design in the lab is not even half of the actual hormone that vitamin E, tocotrienols, tocopherols. Like, they're not even touching the size of how complex. They just give you a bit of what they can synthesize, and they put it in. But natural vitamin E is unbelievable, but you don't need lots of it. So the same thing we have to run with. Where do we get zinc and vitamin E? Seeds. So anytime you see seeds in raw dog food, it's people like me that go, look, pop it in there. It'll probably benefit the dog. We'll soak them first, and we'll turn them into a mush so the dog can actually get some great stuff out of it. They would eat whole birds and get some seeds from the tummies, and I'm sure it's a great food. But it probably wouldn't have been my first ingredient to put in the raw dog food. It's like seeds are way down there. But, so a little bit of them.
That brings up a good question for me. I keep seeing on these raw companies, it just says natural vitamin E. It doesn't tell us it's pumpkin seed or, where it's coming from. And I actually emailed one of them, and they've been really dodgy about it.
Yeah. There's a vitamin E that they all use, comes from sunflower seeds.
Okay.
And because of I can't remember the exact term for this this vitamin E, but it is, you only have to use it. First of all, it is natural. It comes from sunflower seeds, and it's not ultra refined. You want to be very careful with your oils. Like anything that's not, the best olive oil, really. Olive oil is like cold pressed, virgin, organic, all that stuff. That's great oil. But refined rapeseed oil, which used to be used in the industry to power engines and oil engines until they found we could put it in food if you just pay somebody enough money. And like those oils are desperate. I mean, refined oils and sugar, they're the two things that are killing us. And that's what ultra processed food is made on. So that's a big problem. But I think a hyalaic sunflower oil, I think it's called. When we see sunflower oil, we bounce and we go, oh no, that's sunflower oil, canola oil, all desperate. You wouldn't give it to the mother-in-law. But small amounts of hyalaic sunflower oil is an unbelievable source of vitamin E. And so if you wheat germ oil, there's another fabulous one, Martina Cassidy, good stuff. Yeah, wheat germ oil is brilliant, and that might be the same one. It's just the ultra refinedness of it. I mean, if you only use a tiny little drop and it gives you this huge amount of vitamin E, wheat germ oil is probably the best source of vitamin E you can take in capsules. So humans, when they buy really natural high quality vitamin E, it's always wheat germ oil. So yes, Martina, it could be wheat germ oil they're using. We'd be very lucky if it was. That's a high quality stuff. But there's also hyalaic sunflower oil, which is probably somewhere along down the line. But yeah, those ingredients you always wonder and just go,
right. I mean, if they're like, well, it's natural, then tell me where you got it from. Natural from.
Yeah.
And I can understand a raw food company wanting to add that because they want to meet those AAFCO complete balance requirements. But what do you say for people that are making their food at home, right? All the time, we've got a pretty big presence on Instagram. We see people putting their food together, beautiful bowls. My bowl never looks like that. But they've got the vitamin E supplement, they've got zinc. There's a few others that are commonly deficient when it comes to the D, manganese, iodine. Iodine's a big one.
Iodine's a great one.
In there. Yeah. So what are your thoughts? Should people be doing this at home as well, or do you just instruct raw food companies to do it?
You know, I don't take any vitamin or mineral supplements. I don't. I might need to, and I kind of wish I'd just bloody do it and just do have a check, you know, go for a check and see where I am and see, you know, it's kind of like something you go in with the three lads and go see who's the lowest in omega-3 or vitamin D. Like we should all be going vitamin D. Anybody over 70 should have been going for vitamin D tests, particularly in the last 3 years of drama. That would have served them would have been a very good thing for them to do. And then making sure that vitamin D stayed topped up, very good idea, and zinc and stuff. So I am a total believer in all that, and supplements have a place for that if you're not getting it from your food. So people worry. So the zinc and vitamin E we've kind of touched on because the raw feeders come with the same worries. They've come, you know, fear is the greatest motivator. So there has to be fear to make you buy a product. So fear of whatever to make you buy anything, it's the fear is behind it. So pet food, you come from the complete food, and a picture of, as I put up there yesterday or 2 days ago, food for white dogs. Can you believe it? I just thought, oh my god, there's a marketing ploy that won't make it into human realm.
There was another one after you posted that. It was rescue dogs.
Yes, and then food for brown dogs. I swear to God. So I'm just thinking, lad, this is getting absolutely crazy. But people are buying this stuff. Those people defending it, and I was like, okay. So what was the point? What was it? Oh yeah. So raw feeders come from this world where they're wound up a bit, and it's hard to shake off those lessons. You know, you kind of get your people ring me for advice, and my bitch is having 9 pups, and I'm like, oh god, I hope I get this right, because it's such a worry. I don't want your kids, you know, the health of your kids on my shoulders. But so people put in these few supplements, and I think, look, if you want to put in a little drop of vitamin E here and there, have at it. I think there's probably quite a lot of vitamin E in most of the foods we feed. We do put in a few little seeds here and there. We do add in some foods that are quite high in vitamin E. It's the same with zinc. You definitely don't need to be adding in zinc of any fashion to any raw fed dog. Zinc is in so many things, but bones alone and meat and everything, you just don't need to add it in zinc. So zinc wouldn't be at all a concern at all. That comes from dry food world. Vitamin E, maybe now and again. Pancreatitis, dogs with pancreatitis have a fat problem, and that fat problem as a result can need a bit of vitamin E, particularly after an acute bout of pancreatitis. Body smashed, and vitamin E is very low, and that drives inflammation, which can aggravate pancreatitis again. So there's times you might use vitamin E, but as a daily thing, I don't with my dog. Omega-3, let's say you're using a lot of cheap raw dog food and it's coming from CAFOs, confined animal feed operations, or just indoor reared chicken. All our chicken's indoor reared and it's all fed grain. So it's all very, very high in omega-6. So if you're feeding a lot of chicken because, you've got 2 German Shepherds and you're after realizing they're meat eaters and you're going, oh my God, chicken is so cheap. Well, then you are feeding quite a high omega-6 diet and quite a low omega-3 diet. There's not a lot of omega-3. Omega-3 is outdoor reared animals. Doesn't matter which one. Anything reared outdoors, lots of omega-3. You don't need to add omega-3 to a beef diet, lamb diet, if it's been wandering around a field. There's more than enough there. But if you weren't eating those really high quality outdoor reared meats, then yes, you might think omega-3 now and again might be a good supplement. But the best source of that isn't a supplement. They've covered this in a number of different places, but the omega-3 supplement industry is dodgy. I mean,
Yes.
humans, 50% of the capsules on the market in EU and US are at their point of oxidization by the time you buy them. So as soon as you crank that lid, it starts taking more from your body than it gives you. And 10% of those supplements are outright dangerous. They're rancid. So it's like the industry is dodgy. And you can imagine when I always worry about a pet food company that put in a fish oil. And I'm like, fish oil. It could be in a 5-liter plastic tub on a warm
Yep.
Rub, there's your fish oil. It's like, that's not the fish oil I want to put in my dog. So I'd rather put that stuff in myself. The answer for fish oil would be small little jars, brown jars, keep it in the fridge, go through them in 20, 30 days. I like phytoplankton. I think that's great because it's grown in glass tubes in Nevada or Portugal here in the US, hot places. Really good, clean omega, sustainable source of really good quality omega-3. But there's lots of different types. So yeah, that's one I might, but the vitamin and minerals, never. Not calcium, because why would you? Bones are full of it. There's never any need, and certainly not in breeding bitches. Very, very dangerous. It's a dark art, and you need to hold the hand of a natural vet. Any breeders listening, anybody adding calcium supplements needs to have a very good reason to do it and have someone that understands that, because very, very tricky and you can go wrong. So so I don't know, it's hard to put those people's minds at ease, but I can't think of one that I would need to put in there. Vitamin D, so much vitamin D in eggs and organ meats, and I just can't think of one that you can. But the iodine one you mentioned, if I could.
Yes.
Everyone's very worried about iodine. So I obviously sell a lot of seaweed stuff, and I love a bit of seaweed, and it's my favorite little kind of addition. It's great. Now finally eating it myself. All these years selling it, I never eat it myself. I'm like the least. I'm just. My wife always says, "Oh, if only people could see you now," and I'm like, "Oh, would you stop?" But anyway, so seaweed is brilliant. So if we look at the RDA of iodine for humans, it's whatever it is in humans. But the Japanese are eating many, many times their RDA of iodine because they eat so much seaweed. So they're more than happy to eat it in different forms and from sushi to whatever else. They love it. And they're extremely healthy. In fact, the smaller islander populations of Japan are the longest living people on Earth, alongside rural Afghanistan and rural anywhere. It seems like the further you live away from a supermarket or a pharmacy, the longer you live. But so iodine, we know we can eat quite a lot of it in natural form, but it's not the case with iodide that comes from a conical flask. Iodide has been separated out from its carbon that we talked about, but also fiber. And we know that if you go wrong with your iodine supplements, your little George Jetson pills, it smashes your thyroid. Your thyroid goes into the blood straight away, and the thyroid freaks out, and it causes serious thyroid issues. So every time we try to sell a seaweed supplement, people will come and go, "How much of this is safe?" And I go, "Oh, we don't know. We can feed lots and lots of this. We give a reserved amount to make sure to cover our butts, But we've never heard of an issue with iodine from seaweed. It only seems to be extremely beneficial. A lot of different benefits for all different things. It's the iodide bit from the conical flask, which is what scuppered people and made everyone worried. Just like the garlic thing, how much garlic is for dogs. It's totally overblown. But when you look at the science behind it, you go, hang on there a second. These are dogs 125 grams of raw garlic a day for 7 days. It's like that would kill anybody. That the dog survived was a miracle. So when you look into these things, you kind of go, often it comes from the world of the manufactured in the pill form, which is just no relevance to real food. And that's the problem with AAFCO. AAFCO is a synthetic conical flask minimum nutrient profile for dry fed dogs, fed ultra processed food. and they compare them to the norms for ultra processed fed dogs. And it's like, oh, there's so many things wrong with all those statements that it just bears no relevance to normal feeding. It has no relevance whatsoever. I mean, they're all minimums and a few handy maximums if you're putting vitamins and minerals in. But the maximums can be so far away. I mean, it's 80 international units of some vitamins and then 5,000 is the maximum. It's like, what use is that? Backed up by 2 studies of 5 dogs over 10 days, and it's like useless. So yeah, many issues, but not with the real stuff. Not with dogs getting too many issues from eating real food. You don't see studies of that or issues with that, just from the supplements, and that's why I don't ever go near them, to be honest.
Yeah, I do something very similarly to you, which is if I have it, I'll add it in if I remember.
Yeah.
Term that Dr. Katie Woodley taught me not too long ago called pulse dosing.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, oh, yeah. She's like, it's really when you remember when your dog tells you that they need it.
Yeah.
I think the key is just variety. Switch up your proteins, different things, and they're going to get different nutrients from the different foods you're feeding.
Yeah.
Every time you buy a new batch, they're getting different nutrients. I mean, depending on where you're getting them from. And, you know, each time we get the same, even if you're still getting beef liver or beef heart, it's going to be the same, the different nutrient profile every time. So
different meat where you can, and all the little additions, mixing up your flavors, even your companies and suppliers where you can. It's definitely variety. And more, when you look at the studies of the complete foods, there was a study there by 4 veterinary nutritionists in 2016. Mike Davies did the study along with a couple of others, and they looked at 132 canned and dry fed foods, including veterinary recommended canned and dry fed foods. And they found that 62% of the complete dry foods and 94% of the complete canned foods didn't meet AAFCO's minimum nutritional standards. 62% of the dry. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of that dry food, that complete dry food, hitting minimum standards. And you're like, how does your vet know that that particular bag has done it? They don't know, because nobody is checking the nutrient quantities of anything. All they care about is the microbiology of the food. So that's why companies like Hills, when they put out in 2017, 22 million cans of pet food that was too much vitamin D. 22 million cans out of factory, and they said, oh, well, it's not our fault. They gave us the wrong vitamins. It's like, it is your fault. You put it out the door. 22 million cans. Nobody checked. Nobody did test it.
Nobody checked.
It's only when somebody starts. And really, that was the start of AAFCO in the 70s, because so many cats were going blind and dying from dilated cardiomyopathy, DCM. And they said, oh, pet food went to the floor. And what they just stopped putting meat in there. And meat is where you get taurine from, taurine, the bull. And so so they said, okay, that's why cats suddenly need taurine in their diet. It's like, no, they need meat in their diet. They just started putting taurine in so they'd stop going blind, and that limped them along. And that was the birth of AAFCO, which started off as the NRC, and it was a good thing. FDA they were funding it, and it was a good thing when, you know, the FDA and NRC were good guys. And then as industry creeps in, they just handed that pet food regulation to the pet food manufacturers. And so you're having to hope when the vampires are guarding the blood banks, you're having to hope, as with every single thing that we're, you know, being told today. It's you need to have good regulation, and there is very little regulation in pet food, and AAFCO are not regulators. They just invent these few little figures. They don't supervise. They don't take you to court. They don't do audits. Nothing. They're just this.
Yeah, and all of these states are blindly entrusting them with.
AAFCO got it in hand.
Exactly. So I want to open up the floor to questions from our audience. I recognize a lot of people that are here, and they know their stuff. So I want to invite them to ask Conor the hardest questions here. Everything right now, he can talk about this stuff in his sleep. I know it. And he is here to answer anything that you guys have. I wanted to bring up this comment as well from Dolce's Legacy. She works with dogs that have cancer.
I know that page.
Yeah. She says, my clients are so besides themselves when I pull them off of synthetic supplements until they can prove a month later, looking at labs, that they do just fine with whole foods. And I think that's really what I want to drive home with this, because I am also a believer in whole foods and variety. And I think that for anyone that's in here that's trying, you know, racking their brain, trying to meet all of these requirements, just relax. Chill out. They're made up. They really are. You know? And you you don't need to feel so bad when you're not meeting every single one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can find a tough question. Fiona says, kelp is seaweed, though. Were we talking about kelp and seaweed?
The kelp thing is interesting. People always say, "Oh, kelp." Kelp is one type of seaweed of 10,000 that live beneath the waves. The kelp seaweeds are amazing. There's more seaweeds under the ocean than there is herbs on the planet, and they each have these cool little compounds that don't exist above the waves, like fucoidin and fucoxanthin, deeply like anti-inflammatory, antioxidative. Seaweed lives in the harshest environment in the world, so it's battered by rocks, and then it's covered in water, then it's air, and it's sunny, and it's cold, and it's crabs, and it's just terrifying. So they're full of all these cool compounds. Kelp is one of them. Kelp is very high in iodine. That's the big tall stuff. It's called laminaria. True kelp is the stuff that the seals swim through. That's very high in iodine. But most other brown seaweeds don't start about 50% the level of iodine of true kelp. So manufacturers always use the word kelp, but they're doing themselves a disservice. They should look at the species they're using. Most of them are using things like AAFCO, Phylum, and a couple of other brands, but there's way less iodine in them. So if they just stated that on their pack, they would be able to put people's minds at ease and go, no, don't worry about the iodine content of this plant. It's nothing like it. Some of the red and green seaweeds have very little iodine. So it's which seaweed we're talking about. Kelp is just one, and very few people use true laminaria because humans eat that, and it's worth a lot of money. It's worth more money than the cheaper stuff we feed to cattle, which is what goes into pet food. Yeah.
This is off topic. I was at Super Zoo a couple weeks ago, and I found a supplement company that for their calcium, they were using coral calcium. Have you heard of that before?
No. Look, I can say something straight away about calcium supplements because I'm very interested in them. And I would say all those calcium supplements, from eggshell to coral to is calcium carbonate. It's just dried calcium carbonate, and it is an extremely poor substitute for the real McCoy. Bone material. Bone is not just calcium. It's glucosamine, chondroitin, and glucagon, glutathione, vitamin C, collagen. All these cool things that are in growth factors and stuff. Bone is incredibly complex, particularly the cartilage on the outside of it. And just to replace that with some calcium carbonate from the coral is just like a very poor, harder to absorb version of the real thing. So I see all those supplements as, look, if you have no calcium at your disposal for some reason, ground eggshells might get you out of a hole for a little while, but you are not doing the joints any sort of service there. I mean, you've still no glucosamine and chondroitin in there, for example, so
sure.
So the calcium supplement industry is strange.
I see a lot of cooked food companies that are using eggshell as their primary source of calcium. Is it your professional opinion that someone who is feeding a cooked diet alone with these calcium supplements or eggshells, that later down the line, they're going to face some deficiencies because of that?
Yeah, you might ask the company how much glucosamine and chondroitin is in this product. Very simple. They're not obliged to have the nutritional analysis complete on their food products. It's quite a spicy meatball. It's about $2,500 per SKU. So they could have 12, 15, 20 SKUs. So it's expensive to keep on track of that. But the fact remains, if you're not putting in on the bone food, then you have a problem. So the cooked food products have it a little bit tricky with that. That eggshell can be made so much better if they use the membrane as well, because the membrane is pure collagen. It's like it's a wonder kid of joint supplement. There's a great study of French athletes there, arthritic knees and stuff. So it's great, but that's just the effect of collagen and a couple of growth factors. That is what that material contains. So eggshell on its own, look, it's calcium, but it's not all the other stuff. And so your dogs
What about bone meal?
Bone meal is okay depending on where you get your bone meal from. So not to flag off the US here, but you have a bit of a problem in the US because 2 of your 5 rendering companies are still taking in cats and dogs. So you have to make sure that your bone meal doesn't contain cats and dogs, but good luck asking them to DNA test your bone meal. So that's a problem. I have also how's it treated. You can have decent quality bone meal. There's people trying to put out low temperature bone meal but the process is harsh. It's stewing bones until it goes to goo. So it's quite a feat. It's a massive pressure cooker. Lots of temperature, lots of pressure for quite a while.
Does the glucosamine and chondroitin survive that?
They're sugars, and I suppose they would. I don't see them going away? That's a good question. I'd like to know. I know it does eliminate some things. Lysine can take a hammering, and a few amino acids can take a hammering because they get deformed. But I think sugars, you can't kill a sugar. He just falls apart and he's still useful. Okay. So I think now that is a very poor answer because I'm not fully sure. And I'd like to know. And
I gave him a good question.
yeah. So I would like to know that myself. But I was looking at the absorption of those bone meals. And it's interesting, bone meal, because, you know, the dry food companies use dehydrated meat in their foods, okay? And dehydrated meat is meat and bone meal. And meat and bone meal is bone meal to a gardener, because they don't make money sending meat to a renderer's vat. Bones go to a renderer's vat. They sell all the meat, as much as they can, to humans. So they don't waste. Heads and spines and legs go to the renderer's vat. So to say it's meat and bone meal, particularly so disingenuous to call it dehydrated meat. But when you make the rules for the labeling, you can say prescription foods, even though it's non-medicinal foods.
Don't get us started.
Yeah, all over the place.
For another live.
Yeah, totally. It's I can't remember. Oh yeah, bone meal. So I'm sure there's good stuff. I'm sure someone's going to put out a good quality bone meal soon. But I haven't seen it yet. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah. Can people eat your seaweed products?
I can't say you can, because once it's an animal product, you're in a category 3, which is it's an animal product. So I can't tell humans can eat it. You have a bit of flexibility with animal products that you don't have with human products. You have a different people looking over you, but the stuff is made the exact same way on the same ingredients. The same with raw dog food companies. They always want to say human grade, because the ingredients are human grade, because you're not allowed to use non-human grade in pet food. Well, dry pet food for some reason can use diseased animals, but raw dog food can't. So you can't take a diseased animal, 4D meat, dead, diseased, dying, disabled. You can't take that and put it in raw dog food. So it is human grade. The problem is your factory is category 3. So as soon as the ingredient comes in, you're category 3 animal product. So you can't say human grade anymore, and you cannot say it on your packaging or your advertisements. You can say we took in human grade ingredients, but you have to be very careful, because you are putting out an animal product in case people come along and spread it on their toast, and which so many people do. You've heard so many stories, lads coming back from poker and eating the raw dog food. No, it was lovely. It was a bit gritty. It's like, so I can't tell you to eat it, no, but you definitely should get a bit of seaweed into your life. It's fantastic, really good quality. It has the same benefits. There's seaweeds that take the tartar off your teeth. There's seaweeds that do all sorts of things, and they absolutely work, and they're just so nutritious. It's like spirulina, but the spirulina world is a bit dodgy. You'd like your spirulina to be US or EU made. You probably don't want it coming from too far away, because they can grow them outdoors, and you don't want algae growing in a warm pond outdoors. You get runoff and very high arsenic and heavy metals and stuff. So you can get better quality spirulina, better it's EU US manufacturing.
Yeah, lots of great gems, guys, if you're listening in. Fiber options if my dog rejects fur and vegetables.
Oh, both of them. That's tricky. The fur one's cool. So you're obviously well read there. So like a bit of fur is great. I think there was a great study in zoo animals that if when you fed, there was the big cats were getting a lot of gut issues. And when you started feeding them at the meat with the fur on the outside, usually horse meat for most of the 20th century. But when you left the hide on the horse, the gut issues went away. Unbelievable. So carnivores have a big need for that stuff, I'm sure. But to miss both of those is tricky. That's putting you in a smaller category. There are fiber supplements you can buy. You can buy things like psyllium husk, which is one type of fiber. You can buy beet pulp. You can buy these ingredients that have tiny benefits fed occasionally. I wouldn't be a massive fan of them. We have a seaweed fiber. It's just a fiber from seaweed. But to me, we're going down the road of putting in eggshells to replace bone. And it's like, they are great.
Chia seeds.
Yeah, chia seeds are great, but soluble fiber, that is. So anything that makes a gel or a goo, that's soluble fiber, and it's great for feeding the bacteria, but it's not insoluble fiber, which is the impossible to digest stuff, which plays a critical role in your digestion too. So very hard to replace. That's so unfair that your dogs. The fur bit is if you feed a horrible dried rabbit ear. No offense to the horrible dried rabbit ears, all ours come from a very dodgy meat sector in France. No offense, France, but the rabbit industry is horrible, and so I wouldn't feed those hairy rabbit ears. I'd want to know how those rabbits were brought up. But my dog won't eat the rabbit ears either. So he'll look at them and go, "Yeah, no, thanks." It's a dry, hairy, really hairy ear. So, but if you took the hair off that ear and you put it in the food, the dog will eat the food with hair hair mixed into it. So you might be able to buy hairy pieces of cattle is kind of common.
Trim it off.
Trim it off and pop it in there. So that's a little bit of hair. They don't need a little bit of it. And mushing your vegetables. So getting your favorite coarse green vegetables, the not nice stuff, grind them down to a goo and just put a little bit into the food, just to start him off on a tiny bit so he doesn't know, although they always know, and then build to what you think is needed. That might be a way to do it, but it's tough. Tough one. That's a tough question.
Yeah. All right. This is a good one. This is from Amy Renz. She's the founder of Goodness Gracious. She's one of our speakers at the Feed Rail Summit. I knew she was going to throw you a good one.
Oh my God. What a question.
Can you talk about the difference between dietary phosphorus and synthetic as it relates to bioavailability, parathyroid hormone, and kidney dysfunction?
Nice one. Thanks a million, Amy. Let me know when Amy's next on so I can pop in a few questions. So look, that is a great question. So the phosphorus thing is great. That's one we should have talked about. So phosphorus is a concern. Let's take the kidney bit because of the parathyroid hormone dysfunction. I'll be less clued in on. But the kidney dysfunction, everyone's very concerned about phosphorus in kidneys. And the reason for that is as you enter stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, stage 1 and 2, nothing, no problem. You can deal with it. I mean, you can live with one kidney, you can live with a tiny bit of one kidney and have a perfectly normal life. So kidneys are great, and you can get by even when you're in stage 1, 2, you just make a few little tweaks. You talk to your vet and we make some tweaks to the diet. But ultimately, we just take it easy. We don't put in things that harm the kidneys, and nice fresh food, no dry food and all that kind of stuff. Great. But as you get to stage 3 and certainly stage 4, which is just calamity, and you just do anything you can see phosphorus rising. And it's like the kidneys are struggling to process phosphorus. And what this became was that we need to be very careful about phosphorus in pet food. So as soon as you hear that, you think, are we talking about real phosphorus or are we talking about the fake phosphorus? So fake phosphorus, dicalcium phosphorus isn't the worst of them. There's phosphates, which is far more likely to be used from treats to pet food. Okay, so it's the phosphates in ultra-processed dry food that are causing the kidney damage. So what they found of studies of cats with kidney disease was that natural phosphorus wasn't having an impact on their kidneys at all. It was the phosphates in dry food. So this was given to us by a top cat vet in the UK. I wish I could give his name out now. I can't remember his name, but Pete Collinshaw. Anyway, so yeah. So since then, we've got 3 or 4 studies of that. So I've got an article on kidney disease on my website there, and you can check them out. So we know it's the unnatural form of phosphorus, again, that the kidneys don't like, and it seems to pack them up. And so if you had an animal with kidney disease, you want to be careful about the types of phosphorus going in there, because phosphorus can be a problem, although later on. And then it's which phosphorus are you using. So we would not be as concerned. So when I started learning about those studies, that's when you have to do an about face. You have to put a post up on Facebook and go, guys, you charge for consults, and then you have to turn around and say, I'm significantly less worried about phosphorus now in half of the kidney disease patients, because actually natural phosphorus has never been shown to be an issue. Lots of natural vets like Nick Thompson are showing with an Excel file, a nice little simple graph. Here's a dog. It was the lady who works with me here, Karen, and she had this dog, Newton, multiple issues all during his life. He had a big kidney problem. He was on a high phosphorus, like raw food, quite a lot, like bones, for example, lots of phosphorus and red meats and stuff. And then his phosphorus readings started going down, even though his phosphorus readings stayed up, just from managing the kidneys. And kidney disease is like a busy motorway, and as you get older, there's more and more crap on the roads, and more traffic on the roads, and so as the road starts to fill up and slow down, that's your kidney disease creeping in. So the number one solution is to take traffic off the roads. So it's not about worrying about natural phosphorus. It's like, okay, let's stop with the unnecessary flea treatments, wormers, boosters. Let's see where the inflammation is. Let's support for this and that. And suddenly you don't have to think about phosphorus at all. So going on phosphorus blockers seems like be a bit of a silly idea, when actually it's not. So that's the kidney dysfunction bit. I love the phosphorus bit. And not an expert on dicalcium phosphorus, but the phosphates bit will cover that. And the parathyroid hormone, no, that's not something I would talk about. I know who knows everything about that, and that's Bren. I used to think I knew something about that until Bren undressed me one day on the Raw Pet Medics on Tuesday night. So it's quite complicated. But again, I'm sure these natural supplements, it's the same way. It's like eclampsia and these issues that dogs can have, not enough calcium. You're taking too much calcium can affect your parathyroid. Real calcium doesn't do it. Those big wolves aren't coming back with
That's right.
a leg and it's going to affect the thyroid of the pups. It just doesn't happen like that. Your body handles these things and just poos out what it doesn't need. But synthetic supplements do cross the barrier, and that's a problem. Yeah.
And another behavior that's quite normal is burying the bones for later. Caching, right? A lot of people are like, "Oh, my dog doesn't like it. He just buried it in the backyard," and it's like, actually, later.
Love that. Somebody said this. I'd like to think I thought of this, and I can't remember anymore. Do you know, like sometimes when you tell somebody else's story so many times, it just becomes your story, and then somebody says, "That's happened to me, not you, Brady." Anyway, that's happened to me a few times. But somebody said that. So all this cool stuff in soil. So like, you know, you've got all your humus and your fulvic acid and stuff, but you've got soil-based probiotics, which are very cool now. S. boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii, and a few others. They're like natural antibiotics, and you can take them, and they're brilliant for you, and they're great. So I love soil-based probiotics, but it turns out, you ever see a dog burying a bone sometimes, particularly my dog here, Dudley, and he'd scratch a little tiny hole because his back legs don't work properly, and it's like real bad job. And then he'll put this bone half in, cover with muck, and walk away. And I'm like, I can still see the thing. I mean, do you think that's people finding that bone? And but what somebody was saying was that maybe that's them cleaning the meat, because back in the day we used to use that as a preservation way, putting the meat under the ground. If you want to hide meat from a scavenger, you got to get it 3, 4, 5, 6 feet down on the ground, not a foot. You know, so just covering it with muck for a few hours could actually purify it. It could actually be significantly cleaner by the time you took it out of that soil. Particularly, so it's interesting. So letting the dog at that is a good idea. They dig them up later for a chew, but I like that behavior. There's something to that we're missing, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, last question as we're reaching the end of our hour. This is a great one from Fiona. Will you be attending Dr. Conor for the Feed Real Summit next year?
I would definitely want to. I definitely want to start doing these.
Let me tell you guys, I tried to get Conor drunk one night before the Natural Dog Expo, and I ended up
you ended up
completely wasted, and he's not in the lineup for this year.
I really want to start doing. There's been so many, like, I'm honored that to be asked, and I love that. Thank you very much for asking. Just this year, while the kids are young and stuff, it's like I have gone the opposite way, and I'm just like, you know, 2 or 3 days here, 4 days here. But so I'm going to turn it back on again, because there's nothing better than meeting up with like-minded people, particularly that night before, sitting around at a table. I just love it. And, you know, you come back brimming with ideas, and I love that. But I'll turn it back on in a year or two, but just not. I'm trying not to.
Completely understand. Fiona says you still owe me $500.
I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Okay. Right, we'll talk about that off air.
All right. I think we wrapped up all of the questions. Yep, that's it. There are a few very good ones, and hopefully we'll have a chance to go back through the comments and get to those. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Conor.
Love it.
Hope to see you very soon.
Cool.
All right.
Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care.